Today on CityCast Chicago, we officially got a new mayor. The Arlington Heights Bears will have to wait. And we're talking bike safety and neighborhood festivals. Joining me is Alex Nitkin from the Illinois Answers Project and poet and community editor for the Southside Weekly, Chima Naira Okoro. It's Friday, May 19th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about.
Chima, I'm such a huge fan of your TikToks. I'm starstruck.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll be cutting up.
Good morning, Alex. Good morning, Naira. How y'all feeling today?
Feeling good.
Good morning. Pretty good.
I'm excited to look back on some big stories from the week, including the mayoral inauguration. But before we get into it, when we started the call, Naira, both Alex and myself had to sort of big you up and talk about how we are fans of your social media. But recently you've been having this, sparked this huge conversation across social media about Chicago icks or your red flags or your pet peeves that you see people out here in these streets doing. And so let's listen to a little bit of that real quick.
Move out the way. I do not like people who call it Cloud Gate. You're not special. Stop trying to be bougie. It is called The Bean. If you call it Cloud Gate, you probably went to the Art Institute. In real life, I don't care if you eat Uncle Remus over Harold's. What I worry about is if you eat chicken tenders instead of ordering wings. Bonus points if you don't get mild sauce or lemon pepper. Do not collect 200. Do not pass go. Go straight to jail. Next red flag. Taking Lower Wacker and expecting your GPS to work. You don't think. You don't use your brain. Matter of fact, another red flag is if you know exactly where you're going when you're on Lower Wacker. You know who else knows exactly how to get around Lower Wacker? Rats. If you want to call it the Willis Tower, cool. But if you correct people for calling it the Sears Tower, red flag. Like if you're out here correcting people, you were either born in the 2000s or you probably from Wrigley. The next red flag is living in Wrigley. That's it. I don't want to hear it. I'm from the South Side next. Another red flag is if you be having your laptop out on a train and a bus. You're fearless, but don't worry. Somebody's going to change that.
I'm totally guilty of having my laptop open on the train. I've done it once or twice, but I'll have to watch myself.
It's okay. We all have room for growth.
I'm not gonna lie, a few of those on the list. Only one that really steps out though. I do like calling it Cloudgate. I just think that name pretty, man. I just think it's a good name. I like calling it The Bean, and I'm not gonna correct anybody. But you know, I do sometimes be like, oh yeah, man, I love going to Cloudgate. And people are like, what you talking about? I mean, you know The Bean. Why you say that?
You got to admit though,
I just like the name. I like
it's got to be partially because you enjoy the satisfaction of telling people, actually, it's actually called Cloudgate and not The Bean. It's okay. You just admit that you get a little bit out of that.
It's a little bougie. I feel like, you like it. You like how it sounds. It's bougie. That's okay. It's bougie.
I pretend not to know who the artist is. Yeah. What is your number one? Like, if you could only pick one, what's the worst one? Please don't say the Cloudgate one.
It's not. I made a follow-up, and my worst one is actually on that list. Mm-hmm. And it's driving over, like, that one big bump that they've paved over now that's still kind of a bump, but also, like, all the bumps on Lakeshore Drive. Like, if you don't have them memorized, but you want to speed down Lakeshore and my, like, head hits the ceiling of the car, I'm filing a lawsuit. Like, I'm definitely...
This is not the last you'll hear from me.
It's not.
Alex, is there one that stuck out to you or one that you have?
Listen, I mean, chicken integrity is very important to me, personally. So whenever I see someone order tenders, or as some people falsely call it, boneless wings, I will call them out for it. I think that it's makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it.
Yeah.
You gotta eat the chicken off the bone. It's better that way.
People are in the comments dying on that hill behind tenders from Harold's, and I'm worried
people
about
can't be saved, you know?
We do got a Harold's episode, and somebody in there admitted that they do like the chicken tender lunch. I ain't gonna put them all the way out there. Mine, I'm gonna stay on food though, is I don't like people who take Chicago hot dogs seriously. So I'm gonna just be real. We grew up with ketchup and mustard and relish in the house, and most hot dogs I ate throughout the year was probably at some cookout that didn't have nothing but barbecue sauce on it. And so people who are like, I'm like, who got sports peppers and celery salt at the crib just on hand? Yeah, we got some onions, but ain't nobody going through all that to boiled hot dogs.
That's true.
We want to hear your Chicago red flags, your Chicago icks. Text us or leave us a voicemail at 773-780-0246, and you may hear yourself on the podcast. Earlier this week, we had an energetic inauguration with Brandon Johnson officially becoming the 57th mayor of Chicago. And I mean, that thing was jumping. Muntu Dance Company opened with a beautiful number. My homie was in it. Avery R. Young, Chicago's first ever poet laureate, read a new piece. I mean, there were multiple choirs, and the mayor came out and delivered a speech dedicated to unifying people. He doubled down on some campaign promises. Naira, as you watched that speech, as you kind of saw what was happening at the inauguration, what did you take from the energy earlier this week?
I feel like a lot of people are hopeful about the political climate of Chicago for the first time in a really long time. I know that we won't know exactly what this like his time in office will look like until it actually happens. And of course, there's some people who are like skeptics, also me, who takes everything with a grain of salt. So I'm like, okay. But aside from like that, I think that the word is like excited and hopeful.
Alex, you watched the speech, and like I said earlier, the mayor doubled down on a few campaign promises that you've been writing about, including reopening mental health facilities and not using property taxes as a way to raise revenue. Do you think he is going to be able to deliver on those?
I think somewhat, yeah. I was listening very carefully for what actual specific promises he was either going to repeat from his campaign or bring back up or call the city council to pass. And there was not a lot there. Granted, an inaugural address is usually a time to set a lot of lofty ideals and kind of generational goals, and he definitely did a lot of that. There were a lot of, I guess you could call them goals, things like fix the public transportation system, which is like, yeah, something we want to aim for, but isn't like, a measurable goal. But the two things that really stuck out to me were, just like you said, Jacoby, reopening closed mental health clinics. And what he specifically said was, we're going to generate revenue that we need to close the city's structural deficit without raising property taxes or imposing fines or fees. He didn't say anything more about that. Then he just sort of changed the subject. I think that looking at it, and especially looking at the ideas that he has proposed to raise revenue, especially if you're talking about something as dramatic as closing, what he calls closing the structural deficit, eliminating like year-to-year deficits, doing that without raising property taxes is, to keep in line with the food conversation, it's like making a vegan Italian beef sandwich. Like, you could do it, it's possible, but like it's going to be very unconventional and like make a lot of people very unhappy, And I'm sitting here just kind of waiting for, when is he going to actually, he's focused so hard on making friends with everyone and making, business leaders and everyone sort of respect him. When is he going to get to the point of proposing something that some people are not going to like?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to be watching for.
We had a CityCast listener reach out and say that during our conversations over the last few weeks talking about former Mayor Lifa, who also talked about reopening mental health facilities that were closed under Rahm Emanuel's tenure, and sort of moving towards a more public-private connection. But organizers in the city have still asked for those facilities to be reopened. And, we want to bring some nuance to this conversation. And we want to think about the quality of services. Because from what I heard in the speech, it sounded like Brandon Johnson also wanted to lean into that private and public connection as well as open facilities. Do we know how he plans to do that?
I think he's going to have to, and you're absolutely right that a lot of his rhetoric was, public and private interests, we all have to come together. It's going to take all of us working together. Some context again, I mean, your regular listeners definitely know all about this, but 6 of the city's 12 publicly administered mental health clinics were closed by Rahm Emanuel as soon as he took office in 2011, and that I think that Heather Sharon on your show the other day put it really well, described it as an open wound that has barely scabbed over. And voters have time and time and time again, in various different ways, made it absolutely clear they really want them reopened. And I think that logistically, it's going to be extremely difficult to say, just undo that decision that happened 12 years ago and reopen the same clinics in the same places. But there's definitely, especially after talking to some advisors to Lightfoot this week, there's definitely a lot of room to do more than Lightfoot did, or at least do something that could let you get away with saying that he followed through on that promise. I mean, you were talking about the public-private model. Really what the Lightfoot mental health funding model has been was to take city dollars and allocate them to privately run nonprofits. The problem is, and I talked to Alderwoman Rossana Rodriguez Sanchez, who's an ally of Johnson, and she has really been on this, we can give all of this money to these private organizations, but how much are they paying their social workers? What quality of care are they really delivering to people? At one point during a city council committee meeting, she she found a job application for a social worker position at one of these, they're called federally qualified health centers, and it was like a $42,000 a year starting salary. We're talking about highly qualified like mental health professionals with master's degrees who have extremely difficult jobs. And so what she and I think a lot of folks in the Johnson administration are imagining is something like eventually a system where we treat as a city mental health workers like we treat police officers. They're public employees, they have pensions, they have high salaries. The question, of course, is how do we get there?
Now, I'm going to bring you in here because another one of Johnson's promises is to double youth employment. But one of the things you've been doing is actually talking with young people in Chicago. Can you talk a little bit about that reporting?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that young people are noticing that adults or whatever the case of city officials might not think that young people are aware of is that they see that their communities lack resources. And the biggest thing that a lot of young people expressed was a need for those resources and a hope that like they would receive those helps in their communities and within the communities that they actually live in and not have to go other places to be able to attain those resources. But one thing one young person said to me when I was at the Vocal Justice Summit was that he might not be interested in some of the jobs that are being offered because he doesn't want to feel like he has to, like, some young people don't want to feel like they have to subscribe to the jobs that are being made available in order to have those resources, if that makes sense. Like, you look at other neighborhoods and like those young people get whatever it is they need or want, whether it's community centers or arts programming or whatever the case is, and they don't have to go out of their way to work for it, if that makes sense. Like, they're just, exactly. And so I understood that as a talking point, but I also think that in the same breath, a lot of young people are really excited that he sat there and, you know, signed that into order. I also think that people have been wanting jobs. Young people have been wanting things to do, ways to make money, not just things to do that are like hobbies, but also things to do that will provide them with money and resources that their parents might not be able to provide for them, as some young people shared with me at that youth summit as well. So I think there's like a mixed reaction to it. But for the most part, I would say a lot of young people have seemed to be like really happy and feeling like something that's very important to them has been heard by dedicating himself to bringing those jobs about.
Yeah, I'm hoping that these new offices he signed into order, particularly the one around youth employment, find creative strategies, because getting to, 100,000 jobs is going to be difficult. And like you said, not everybody wants to be a lifeguard or be a camp counselor. People have different interests and different hobbies around the city and want to see how can those be used as well. But like you said, they want to have to travel to the other side of the city to have to work in those spaces. So again, the mayor has made a lot of promises and has started to take some action even this week. We'll be following that closely, and especially with his first city council meeting coming up next Wednesday. We're going to be covering that in our CityCast newsletter, which people can subscribe to at chicago.citycast.fm. With such a huge inauguration happening this week, we also want to pay attention to some stories that might not make the front page of the news this week. And I want to start with you because you're talking about bike safety this week, which is going to be huge as we move forward. There have been measures passed in the city council to build more bike safety infrastructure in neighborhoods, to try to keep people out of bike lanes. But I want to hear you talk about a special day that took place earlier this week.
Yeah, so we had the National Ride of Silence, right? Which is a bike ride that takes place across the United States and in multiple communities in Chicago, that honors the lives of cyclists that were killed, especially in traffic. Cyclists are not safe driving on the road or riding on the road with drivers because folks are not careful. Specifically on Lakeshore Drive, there's an intersection, Balbo and Lakeshore Drive, that has a stoplight, that has a crosswalk, but people run the light because the intersection is a T shape. And so technically there's no oncoming motor vehicle traffic, but there is oncoming cyclist traffic, and folks are always speeding on Lakeshore Drive. And so a lot of cyclists have been hit or almost hit. I actually witnessed, I skateboard and actually witnessed a skater almost get hit. Like it would have been horrible if they would have gotten hit because the driver was going so fast because they didn't stop at the light. I'd been following these tweets about this truck that's been delivering to a Starbucks on the north side that keeps parking in the bike lane. And it's like, cyclists went and put up cinder blocks in order to stop the truck from parking right there. And then the truck just drove over the cinder blocks. And it feels like, a petty back and forth between cyclists and corporations. But in reality, the larger implications of this is safety. The larger implication is a disregard to other people's modes of transportation, which has resulted in people being seriously injured and lives being lost, which is just unfortunate and can definitely be avoided. And so I think it's really important to talk about this because it's getting warm. A lot of people are getting back on their bikes and their skateboards. Me personally have been skating from place to place. And so I just think that if we talk about it more, then maybe we can get all of us on the same page.
And again, that's something that Brandon Johnson, another one of his promises, to really build out not just lines on pavement, but a barrier protected, safe grid of bike lanes. And again, that's something that's going to involve making a lot of drivers very unhappy. So again, the question is he willing to really lean into that and spend that political capital to make it a reality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spend a good amount of mornings doing a 8 to 10, but I have to make my way around 55th Street before I get on Lakeshore. And every single time I'm riding, there's just this constant paranoia that I'm going to get doored because the bike lane is so close. It's centered between the street and parked cars. And at no point are you ever really sure if somebody's coming up on your left or your right as you're riding up 55th Street. I'm hoping to see more investment and not just in, high traffic corridors, that definitely needed along Belmont or Milwaukee, but across the city because from, neighborhood to neighborhood, the bike lanes change so quickly. Alex, another story that you've been following is what's going on with the the Chicago Bears. They continue to try and make it clear that not only do they want to develop the land out in Arlington Heights, but they want to turn it into a stadium and an entertainment complex, but they don't want to just spend their money. What does that look like down in Springfield?
Yeah, so it looks like the latest version of a bill that has been discussed really since the beginning of this session. How is the state going to somehow accommodate the Bears' vision and meet their needs? The latest version was proposed by Representative Marty Moylan, who represents the northwest suburbs there. It looks like it is not going anywhere at this point. Session is about to end, and even the Bears filed as neutral on it. They said that it was not good enough for them, but it's still very generous. It would basically freeze the Bears' property taxes and allow them to negotiate payments with the cities, school districts. Mm-hmm. I think that it's worth laying out just the context that it has been, for the past several decades, really common practice for cities to roll out subsidies for new stadiums. And it has also basically become accepted as fact that those subsidies are never worth it to taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of research now to back this up, which is why I think understandably the folks in Arlington Heights are so guarded and really up in arms, and folks in Springfield too.
We still paying off the spaceship.
Yeah, I think that it was really instructive just this past week. There was a story about how the Bears, who own that property in Arlington Heights, filed for just a routine demolition permit. And there was this uproar in town of, how can you just let them do this? And the city had to say, well, we can't just arbitrarily deny a permit. But it goes to show how much scrutiny is going to be on any kind of plan because, the Bears have said over and over, we don't want money for a stadium. We just want money for this big mega development and all the housing and jobs it's going to create and everything like that.
Just everything else.
But yeah, just literally everything else that we're going to build. But I think that what, residents there are wise to is that literally any money for this that is not paid by the team is going to be paid by someone else, by the fans, by the schools, by the towns, by the state, somebody. And you can talk all you want about how the stadium and the development are going to create lots of economic, activity and opportunity for the state and the area, but they're also going to be using the roads and the sewers, and kids in the new housing are going to go to the schools, and so that's why we all pay taxes. And so I think the question really now is what happens if the town and legislators call the Bears bluff. It seems like at this point their alternative that they're saying is not necessarily that they would stay in Chicago, because that ship has sailed, it seems like. The question is, would they move to St. Louis or Columbus or someplace that would offer those kinds of subsidies? I don't really know. And I don't know if a lot of folks are willing to take that risk.
Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends with some good news. We want to make sure we leaving people with some positivity, some events to go to, some things to look forward to. Naira, you got some good news for the people today.
Yes, I do. Social Works is having their open mic. They're like a youth open mic. I'm like, what is it called? I promise y'all I host it. I will be hosting it along with Javon Myers. I am one of the hosts of Social Works Open Mic, and it's going to be on Monday, 5/22 at 4:30. It's for young people, but also if you want to volunteer, definitely go to Social Works site to check that out. It's a part of a weekend of just fun events that Social Works has going on. I feel like mine coincides with yours, Kobe. So that's my good news. I'm really excited for that, and I hope to see y'all at the weekend of events that we have coming up.
Yes, Social Works is also partnering along with a great artist in Chicago, Shawnee, and her organization, Black Joyride. G Herbo's organization going to be out there because on Saturday at the Harold Washington Cultural Center in Bronzeville, they're doing a community bike ride and a wellness block party. You can bike 5 miles through the Bronzeville neighborhood and then come back. They'll have yoga. They'll have some food. They're going to have good energy out there. And so I'm going to definitely get my bike. And then, Alex, what is your some good news? We was talking about spring is a little trash here in Chicago, but summer it's around the corner, which means it's time to get back outside. What you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the fact that it is finally neighborhood street fest season. I think that we do a lot of talking about going downtown for like the big fests, but I have much, warmer and fuzzier feelings around the neighborhood fests. The street is closed down. You get those familiar, like big corn dog signs, the music, but I think what holds a very special place in my heart is Midsommarfest, the big Swedish festival that takes over Clark Street in my own neighborhood of Andersonville. It's just a huge festival. It just gives all of Clark Street and Andersonville to pedestrians, which I just find really cool. And one of my favorite parts is that there are a whole bunch of stages and music. There's one stage at Foster that's like the Swedish cultural stage, and through most of the weekend they have like Swedish like folk music and stuff, but the big headliner on Saturday night is an ABBA cover band called Dancing Queen, an ABBA Salute. And they absolutely bring the house down every single year. They are incredible. The street's just absolutely packed with people rocking out to ABBA, and I'm very excited.
I mean, there are so many festivals going on throughout. I feel like every time you come with a fantastic event. Naira, do you have a favorite Chicago neighborhood festival?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not gonna lie. The first year I lived in Hyde Park, I experienced the Silver Room Block Party, and it was bussin'. And so I'm really excited to see like what this like newer version of it is looking like, because I didn't get to go last year because it was at the same time as another festival. So I'm excited to tap in this year.
Yeah, that was my answer as well, the Silver Room Block Party. They've moved now over to Oakwood Beach, but they do good work, very organized. I thought the music last year was great. It was really good energy. There was something in a pre-COVID world about being jam-packed on 53rd Street that I low-key admired. But 3 years into a pandemic, I ain't missing it as much as I used to. I want to give a huge thank you again to our guests, Alex Nicken and Naira. Thank y'all for stopping by for CityCast Chicago this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Before I let you go, I want to give a huge thank you to the people who make CityCast Chicago. That's lead producer Simone Alisea, our newsletter editor Sydney Madden, producer Elizabeth Kama. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, at chicago.citycast.fm. One more thing. Do you want to join the CityCast Chicago team? We're looking for our next lead producer, and applications are due mid-June. You can check the show notes for more details. In the meantime, in between time, I'll be here bright and early on Monday. Hopefully you'll join me. Peace. Naira, the political back and forth between Chicago and the Bears are on to Heights, Springfield. What are your thoughts on it? Do you care?
I don't even know what's going on. I've heard very little about this. So what y'all are talking about is the most like energy I've given it.
I mean, I want to make it clear, I really don't care about football or the Bears. I'm in it for the tax policy. That's what gets me going.